All right, so I'm making this video as a follow-up to the video I made a couple days ago, in which I was walking you through creating a proposal for a new client using AI SEO, digital marketing as the primary method of communication. So I set up a little presentation. The good news is we closed the customer in the sense we won their business. I hate saying close, it sounds so predatory, but that's just how CRMs call things, right? They call them closed one, they call them a prospect, they call them a lead. And so I'm just using those terms, although I hate using those terms. In reality, I won their business. And so what I wanted to do today is I wanted to show you as a follow up. When I made this video about 10 days ago, I took the time to create that proposal and show you exactly how I would format that. Today, what I want to show you is like what's next and kind of show you how the conversation went using data. And I'm going to be talking a lot about cognitive biases in this video and how I'm building our product SplashDash to really acknowledge a lot of those cognitive biases. Because at this point, I've probably pitched hundreds of business owners at this time since I've been doing this for about 8 years. So I watch people's faces very closely to see how they react to certain things. And I'm trying to combine that all into one product so that when you go to a meeting, when you go to a presentation, when you go to talk to somebody, you can be confident that the data that you're giving them is backed by science and that you have a plan. I'm really big on this idea that you should not be gambling with digital marketing. I can't even tell you how many times I hear somebody say when they come to work with me, they're throwing stuff and seeing what sticks. And that's just not the way to go about it. So let's talk about what a cognitive bias is. If you're not familiar with this term, it's really the fact of science. And these are real systematic errors that people make when they're making decisions. And the reality is decisions are emotional. And if I could really sum this down into one thing, it's that people make emotional decisions. They don't rely on logic as much as you think they do. And there's really three core ones that you're going to find throughout today's presentation that I'm going to show you. Is the first one is anchoring. If you tell somebody a price, they're immediately going to say, oh, that's what this costs. Okay. They're going to set that as the expectation. So if you start with a higher price and when you pitch a higher price, they're not going to be shocked. If you anchor with a high price and you tell them a low price, they're going to think it's a deal. If you anchor with a price and you say something way higher, they're going to think it's expensive. And so you've really got to understand that in digital sales, anchoring is really critical and it influences a lot of the conversation afterwards. So I'm going to show you today when we recommend advertising budgets, when we show them how their competition is doing, when we talk about how well they're going to do in a marketplace, how many leads they're potentially going to get, how many customers they're going to get. That's all coming down to anchoring. And it's really important to understand that this is a real cognitive bias. The second one is the swimmer's illusion. I talked about this in a previous video, and I always talk about this with our team. And it's the simple fact that people are going to succeed anyways. You just happen to be the person that gives them a website, that tells them what to do, that runs their ads. They were going to be successful with you regardless. I never take the responsibility of someone's success solely myself. That business that I chose to work with was going to be successful regardless of me. It's similar to a student that gets an MBA program. That student was going to be successful. They just happened to go through an MBA program. So the swimmer's illusion is something that's very real. And I've said this in a lot of conversations in the past, and I'm going to touch on it today, especially when you're presenting or you're pitching to a client to gain their digital marketing business or do digital marketing in general. You've got to know the chances of success in that marketplace because that changes the framing of how you're going to pitch your services or how you're going to do your deliverables, right? If the market looks way too competitive, you may want to step your framing back a little bit. If they're ripe for the situation, you want to increase your framing and so on. So the swimmer's body fallacy, you can see this in so many different things in the world. And for this example, it's swimmers are good swimmers because they're tall and they have lanky arms. It's not because they train a lot. Makeup models are makeup models because they're born beautiful. It's not because they get plastic surgery, etc. They're born that way, and so they become successful that way. So the money is made in the client selection. And the last one is confirmation bias, which is tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs. And so if someone thinks Facebook ads doesn't work, you may want to say in your pitch, Facebook ads doesn't work. If someone thinks that social media is toxic, you may want to say social media is toxic. And so you want to understand what people's confirmation biases are and play to that. And that's exactly what happened during this pitch, as you're going to see, as we got to a certain section of the presentation and the client started nodding their heads because they said, that makes sense. I believe this. This is what I stand for. This is my market. This data makes sense. when you have confirmation bias baked into your presentation, what you're going to get is you're going to get somebody who has more of a comfortable buy-in with you. And guys, this is not manipulation. Sales does not have to be manipulation. You're simply bringing up in conversation things that they may not have thought about. For example, loss aversion, which is another cognitive bias, which is just telling somebody what they potentially have to lose if they do nothing. It's a very common sales tactic. It's a very common persuasion tactic. Scientifically, we are more prone to think about what we have to lose than think about the benefits we have to gain from something. Nobody stays up at night thinking about, I'm going to gain this, I'm going to gain that. People stay up at night thinking, I'm going to lose this. I'm not going to be able to make payroll. I may have to lay off this employee. I may have to leave my company. I may have to get a new job. How am I going to pay the rent? That's how people think about things. So you've really got to understand some of the cognitive bias going in. Now, to get started, this was what I actually proposed to them. Now, granted, I made a video in a couple days back talking about lifetime value with a customer. So you can see there's really two basic line items when you work with Develomark, which is our agency, which is the advertising spend, which we scientifically get through SplashDash. And I'm going to show you exactly how we do that. And then there is the Develomark monthly retainer. So that's typically what we charge for an introductory rate to work with our agency. Granted, we do so much more than what's given there. We have so many people, so many of my friends that look at me and say, why in the world would you charge that much money? You should be charging way more. But they fail to realize the value of lifetime value. And if one person gives me $1,000 for 10 years, that's not $1,000. That's potentially $300,000. That's a way different approach at looking at a customer. Now, there's a lot of conversation about CAC, cost per acquisition. And you've really got to think about it this way. If I'm getting a customer and they're paying me $12,000 per year, I could take $6,000 of that and go get a new customer. And that's how you scale. So you really want to create a model that makes the most sense. I found this model to make the most sense for our agency because the customer doesn't have to pay a large upfront fee. The reality is people don't trust you. There's so many snake oil salesmen out there promoting their ads, going on Upwork, going on Fiverr. Everyone has a horror story about working with an SEO company, especially as we're introducing AI SEO, LLMO, AEO, AI engine optimization. These are kinds of things that people just are not going to trust you. And so I like to mitigate the risk. I've mentioned in previous videos, I treat my working relationships just like the phone carriers treat their service models. They sell you the iPhone, that's the hardware, that's the website for us, and then they give you the monthly service on a monthly basis while you're financing the hardware. So we do 12-month agreements. This is exactly how we work with that. And then we break up those installments into 12 payments. I'm going to recoup all of our revenue over 12 months. And then after that, we get the customer to renew, but also they don't have to pay this extensive amount up front. We both mitigate our risk. If they don't hold up their end of the bargain, they can't keep the assets that we provide to them. If we don't hold up our end of the bargain, they don't have to pay us. And they've only paid us $1,000, let's say, or $2,000 or $3,000. Whatever risk was mitigated. Sales is all about mitigating risk and understanding loss aversion. Instead of asking the business owner, in this case, what do you have to gain? Ask them, if you don't grow, what's there to lose? If you don't grow, what can't you do? Start thinking in cognitive biases. And one of those biggest cognitive biases is understanding risk. So first step in any presentation that we do is we talk about competitive analysis. So this is a report that you can pull directly inside of SplashDash called competitive analysis. And what it'll do is it'll search the marketplace and find their 10 competitors at a local level and compare them on averages between a few different benchmarks: organic traffic, domain authority, reviews, keywords, and domain age. Now, I picked these categories because 3 of these different things right here are critical to making sure that the client is going to potentially succeed. And those 3 categories are domain authority, reviews, and domain age. Organic traffic and keywords, those are all metrics that you guys can completely increase just by doing a lot of SEO. But the 3 categories that automatically give me the idea that somebody is a swimmer's body illusion or swimmer's body fallacy is if they're already ahead in those different categories. Just by installing a website into their business, just by doing some basic branding and SEO, as I'm going to show you, if they're already ahead, I'm more confident that they're going to get results, so I will sell them a package. If they are well below, that typically I won't do marketing for them. I won't recommend advertising for them. And this is where client selection becomes absolutely critical. So in this case, when we were presenting to them, we told them their strengths and we told them their weaknesses. The strengths here are that they're already ahead of the game. They like hearing that. They don't want to hear that this is going to take forever for it to work. They want to hear where can they optimize right now and recoup the money that they spend. Because if this business is going to be giving me $12,000 per year and I can get them a return on investment within 45 days, obviously they're going to be very stoked about that. When I get them that return on investment, I'm going to tell them that. And I'm going to talk about that when you manage the client CRM or you have access to the client CRM. I'm going to constantly sell them as much as possible on the relationship ongoing, even though I've already gotten the relationship. So many times in accounts management and so many times in customer service, you just chill back and assume the customer's loyal to you forever. That's not the reality. People are value-based people. They're always shopping for different options, whether they like it or not. That's the whole essence of advertising. The moment somebody gets off a call with you, the moment somebody gets off the phone with you, they're getting bombarded with ads of people trying to take away their business from you. And so I'm going to consistently tell them that if I make them their ROI, they need to know that. And I do that through text messaging and email. Doesn't need to be this big formal thing. So I talked about that in my previous video. And then from there, this is where the confirmation bias comes in. I found that a lot of the large SEO tools, they make no sense of who they're competing with. In this case, we're looking at it based on zip code and mile radius. And so when you look at this list, the customer's pointing at it and they're going, oh yeah, I know that guy. Oh yeah, I don't like that guy. Oh yeah, that guy's my cousin. Oh yeah, I know that person. So this confirmation when you're selling is playing to the confirmation bias because they know you're picking the people that make the most sense for them to compete against. And so this table that you're looking at is filtered from domain authority from highest to lowest. And for those of you that are not aware, the higher the domain authority, the more likely I am to rank. So the reason why I'm excited to work with this business is because they're highly likely to get business from this area. I can just see it. And I'm going to show you that in a series working with a customer. However, in this case, you can look at the table and clearly see what competitors we need to worry about and which ones we don't need to worry about. For example, another one that might be really great in this situation would be American Landscaping because their domain age is 13 years. And that's the lowest, that's the oldest domain out of the entire list. Domains that have more age typically will rank higher on the search results and get recommended in the LLMs because that longevity that domain has had over time has allowed it to gain more backlinks, more referring domains, more content on their website, etc. So there is a golden situation when you're working with the customer. And that golden situation is those three key metrics, their authority, their reviews, and their domain age are higher than the average in that local marketplace. So that's why when I made SplashDash, compared to a lot of the big tools, I really focused in on making sure we can compare at a local level. When I was showing our clients over the past 8 years tools of these larger scales, and nothing against them, I love a lot of them, but a lot of the times they were showing me completely irrelevant results from national, franchise, and listicles. And that's not really useful to our client. My client is not competing with HomeAdvisor. They're competing for traffic share for HomeAdvisor, sure, but they're not at a business level competing with HomeAdvisor. So putting HomeAdvisor on that list really doesn't make sense in this situation. Now, sure, HomeAdvisor sells a ton of tree leads. That's a given. But we're not competing against them. We're competing against the other mom and pops that are around, right? And so once we understand the competition, I frame the conversation to going back to what the customer values. So this is a report that you can run in SplashDash called Customer Sentiment, and you can do this on Google Maps too. But basically all it does is it tells me how much certain keywords are mentioned on the reviews. And this one, we found 181 words and how highly they were reviewed. And so Joe clearly is a highly optimized option here. Crew, cleaned yard, those are kinds of things that we're going to put into the advertising of the campaign, and we're going to put into the images of the campaign as well. So when I come to a meeting, I come prepared with what things visually might look like. So we've been using Google's Nano Banana to put that information in place. And so based on the sentiment, we're going to want to showcase different types of images. Now, our agency does all the photography for the customer and does all the videography as well. If you work with somebody, you can hire a photographer or videographer to do it for yourself. But the main point here is I want to get buy-in from them. I want to show them the vision of what we're looking for. And whenever we present some of this AI information, we're going in there and saying, be very wary that this is AI, but I want to show you a mood board of the kind of stuff that we're looking for. So as you're selling, you're also creating the project management that needs to get done to hand it off to the people that are going to be executing the work. In this case, it's photographers. I want to show the photographer, we need this shot, we need this shot, we need this shot, we need this shot. And that's all based on the sentiment of what the customer values. I can't even tell you how many websites we've made in the past that are not getting as much results as the websites that we're making today that are just one page. These websites in the past were hundreds of pages. The new websites we're making are a page and some dynamic pages, which we're going to talk about in the future. But because we're taking a more scientific approach, we're doing less work, remaining profitable, and the client is getting the results that they're looking for. So from there, we want to look at what the market values as well. This report is a little bit different because this report is actually looking at 38 tree removal businesses in their area, and it's analyzed 2,771 customer reviews. Now, when I show clients this data, there's a lot of confirmation bias going on here. We're looking and seeing, okay, customers clearly value the word crew and images of the crew because it showed up 88 times. They clearly value a team that they can physically see on the website. If you're selling to a customer and you're proposing these ideas, you need to show data that's backed behind it, or else you're just guessing. And there's nothing more toxic or nothing more unhealthy than a relationship where both parties are just simply guessing. So I like to show the client this data and saying, look, crew on the website, team on the website, showing customers how much we clean up the yard, giving them a fair price estimate on the website, showing them that we're a company and we're arborists and we do stump removal. Those are non-negotiables. We have to have those on our website because 2,771 people have left reviews on your competitors' tree removal businesses. And these are the words that show up the most often in a positive light. Now, if I wanted to combat negative, I would click the little negative button and see what people don't like in that marketplace and then combat that as well. When I do that, it's giving me a good understanding of what to put directly on the website page. And that's where I come up with our wireframes. You see, this approach is much more data-driven than it is, I'm going to guess. I think this is what we want on the page, or the worst thing you can do, what the client wants on the page. Because now you're making the client be the person who has the expertise and you're just being an order taker. At that point, you might as well work at a McDonald's. What you need to be is a data-driven consultant. And that can only happen if you prepare your sales presentations in ways like this, where the information is simple for the client to understand, so they have extreme confirmation bias. Going forward, we start talking about visibility in the AI engines. So this in SplashDash you can run. It's just simple GPT visibility report, and hooray, you're actually pretty visible in the search results inside of ChatGPT. And from there, what we're looking at is where are you not mentioned and closing the gap on where you're not mentioned. And then we create content on the website talking about those things so that when we run a GPT visibility report in the near future, they can clearly see how they're being mentioned, where they're not being mentioned. And that gives us something to consistently work on. I got to tell you guys, like I said in the beginning, just because you got the client doesn't mean you're going to keep the client. If you're focused on lifetime value, which can buy you a house, it can buy you a car, it can buy you vacations, it can buy you a marriage if you want, whatever you want to buy, you should be able to tell the customer the value that you're giving them on a monthly basis and see how much money you're making them. And so when we pull these things, we are really critically looking at where we're not being mentioned. And this gives us the opportunity for the SEO research that we need. So SplashDash is going to go out. It's going to simulate as many keywords as you want, up to 100 per report. And it's going to show you where the client's being mentioned and where they're not being mentioned. And from there, what you want to do is you want to optimize the website, ideally creating a page with that exact URL and the content listed directly on that website for those target keyword phrases. And that's going to allow you to rank for more mentions inside of ChatGPT. And you want to monitor this as much as possible. In this case, they were actually pretty visible. And so that's good news to tell to the customer. You want to tell them things that they're doing well as they're not doing well. So this shows them really how they stand and where the opportunity is. Going forward, this is a process that we've been following at DevelopMark that really allows us to do content at scale. And before ChatGPT, this simply wasn't possible. The client always gives us a list of their priority towns, specifically because we work with home service companies, and companies who service areas are very popular. So what we do is we define those priority towns. We store those records inside of a database like Airtable, which is a CSV file. And what's cool is when you add a row to that table, it creates a new page with a specific URL structure directly on the client's website. So that's the strategy that we're going to be doing this for all of their location, for all of their services. Traditionally, something like that would take forever to do. And that would be something that you needed a full-time SEO person to do. You needed a full-time content person to do. But now we're leading with artificial intelligence to get this stuff done in the beginning of the working relationship with the clients. If, for example, you're thinking about drip feeding these pages over time, if you sell the way I just mentioned to you, that's not going to be something that you have to worry about because you know the client is committed to you for the term of 12 months. And so, or 24 months or 36, depending on how long you've had the customer. You start the first year with 12 months, you do the second year with 24 months. After, when you're on that third year, then commit to 3 years. By that point, you should have a customer for life as long as you keep delivering value to them. And so you want to do all of this stuff up front as much as possible. So that's the process that will go inside of there. Now, this is where the confirmation bias really came in, is when we started to show them what the market looked like in their area. In this case, for example, which is a town that's a couple towns over from us, the target population was about 263,000 people. That's the maximum amount of people that we could potentially reach once per se, not counting frequency, which is how many times people see our ad over and over again. And so you see that there's a lot of diversity here. There is a large white population, there's a large Hispanic population, there's a large Black population. And so in this case, I'm going to recommend that the website contains this level of balance when it comes to diversity. Now, that's not being manipulative. People just like seeing themselves in the ads that they're running. So to sit here and assume that this is a large Hispanic market without looking at the data is just wrong. You're doing the client a disservice. So when we pulled up this report, the client was pointing at it and they go, yeah, that makes sense. Our area is becoming a lot more diverse. People are moving into our area a lot more. It is not just a white area like everybody thinks. Our customers are millennials and they are a diverse population and everybody buys trees. There's not a specific person that does. So when we create their website, we're going to focus in on those different populations as much as possible. And that's going to allow us to speak the language of that customer specifically. Now, when you do this, you also want to look at what the key areas of the generations are. In this case, it's millennials, and that makes a lot of sense. Millennials are the ones that are potentially buying houses. Millennials are the ones that are looking at investment properties. They may be the perfect fit to cut down trees. And so in this case, we want to show younger demographics of people on the website. If I ran the same report for a tree company somewhere in, let's say, I don't know, Pennsylvania, and the demographics were mainly boomers, I would show boomers on the website. You see, I'm catering the client's performance and campaign to the data. I'm not using myself personally to make assumptions of how these things work. That's so dangerous to do. The moment you're in a situation where you're, I think, let's try, you've already lost. You've got to go indecisive. So when I pulled up this data, they pointed at and they say, that makes so much sense. Our best customers are 35 years old, 30 years old. Our best customers are almost 40 years old. That's in that millennial sweet spot. And so that's what we're going to showcase on the website. We're going to showcase the Black, white, and Hispanic population at that millennial age. Could be a first-time home buyer, could be a real estate investor, could be, not to say we're not going to target the older generations as well, the Gen X and the baby boomers. But what I'm trying to tell you is you want to get a good baseline of this data as much as possible. Now, when we go to recommend the advertising budget, we want to look at the keyword phrases that people are going to type in. Now, for most service-based businesses, it's really not that difficult. It's a lot of just the basic keyword phrases that you want to show up in Google Ads. In Google Ads, they now have Performance Max, which allow you to do this with AI just really quickly as much as you can. And so one of the things that was interesting here was that tree cost calculator was one of those things that came up. Now, generally speaking, they charge about $2,000 to remove a tree on average. So if we get them a lead and they close a customer, they made $2,000 in gross revenue. That's not profit. They have expenses that come off of there. However, what's important about this is that keyword indicates to me that people have no idea how much this costs. So in our development approach, when we go to actually make the website, we actually may put a calculator directly on the website. And on that calculator, guys, back to what I was saying about loss aversion, people will think about what they have to lose. They will never think about what they have to gain. We may make that calculator focused on those cognitive biases so that when they go on the website, it'll show the cost, $2,000 per tree, and it'll show the estimated savings, or it'll show what they won't lose by doing it. A tree could be a dangerous thing. It could fall on a house. It could fall on somebody's could actually fall on somebody specifically, causing an injury. It could devalue the property's values in that area, leading to neighbors frustrated with you, right? So there's a lot of things that you could lose by not actually doing this. And we want to touch on those things to educate the potential user. So every time we look at keyword research in a marketplace, I like to bring this up to the customer, but I don't like to overwhelm them with data. I simply want to let them know, here's what you could expect to pay per click. Here's the target keywords that we're going to go for. And that ultimately drives our strategy on seasonality. In this business, everything is seasonal. As you can see, if you go into SplashDash and you run a keyword trend comparison report, we created this report because we found customers love seeing seasonality information. When things are slow, we have an answer. When things are busy, we have an answer. We're never sitting there sucking our thumbs thinking about, why are they slow this month? Well, the reality is you're not comparing things year over year. You're stuck comparing things month over month. You expect their traffic to grow month over month. In reality, that's just not how things work. There's so much data, which is ridiculous, about when it's sunny, the stock market goes up. When it's raining, the stock market goes down. And so seasonality is a huge factor of how people do business. Don't underestimate seasons. And so when we do the advertising budget, we're going to look and say, okay, we're going to start to ramp up, really spend a lot of your advertising dollars during June, and we're going to really lower the advertising budget. Doesn't mean we're going to go to zero. We're just going to disperse it frequently in January. Looking at this from a yearly perspective, I can see with keyword trend comparison directly inside of SplashDash, we may want to start increasing the budget during March. That's when the searches start going up. We want to be prepared because people may be planning that information long term. Now in SplashDash, you can put in any keyword inside of this section and get that exact data. So you're much more prepared to sell when you start talking about seasonality. Again, back to confirmation bias. They're going to go, that makes sense. This makes sense. That makes sense. They're buying in every time you show them something that makes sense. If you're showing them complex backlink data, complex geogrid data, complex keywords and URLs and top pages and all these things, you're going to lose the customer. You want to keep things as simple as possible. And so for me, this took 5 minutes. I ran a couple of reports, screenshot it, and put it in Canva. And then I was able to present to them there. That's where the budget recommendation came in. Now, keep in mind, this was the budget recommendation for those towns with those populations, filtered down by millennials and Gen X, also with the towns and the actual cost per click data that we're going to show you in the next slide. So this came up to a budget of $1,846. Customer had confirmed to this. They said that makes sense. It's not that much, but it's also not that little. It's still a lot of money, but as long as we get a return on investment, that's worth it. And that's where we show them their expected amount of customers that they can get from the actual ads campaign. So based on SplashDash's estimates here, which took the population, took the filters that I did with the generations, and then it took the cost per click data, and it said you're going to get 1,000 clicks if the website that we make converts at a 2% conversion rate. Just a quick hint, our websites convert at a much higher conversion rate, but it's major key that when you're doing these kinds of things, you're providing a realistic expectation and a conservative expectations, because clients will anchor. And so the anchor right now that you're looking at is 6 customers. If we don't generate 6 customers with our digital strategy, that's the anchor that they're looking for, because that's what I committed to. So the lower the anchor, the better. However, if their stats in the competitive overview are way above average than the competition, anchor a little bit higher depending on their goals, right? So in this case, they're going to get 21 leads. Out of 21 of those leads, they might close 33% for whatever reason. Some are price conscious, some are actually interested, some found another company by the time they got back to them. There's all sorts of reasons that you can't predict that someone's going to win. And then they get 6 customers from there. Out of those 6 customers, they're going to generate, at that point, they're going to generate $12,000, $20,000 in revenue, depending on how that goes. When we work with the CRM, again, guys, I want to criticize this, or I want to not criticize, I want to make this very critical that as we go about the relationship, I'm going to be constantly telling them about new leads they're getting. I'm going to be constantly listening to their phone calls. I'm going to be constantly sending them new leads that they've gotten through the internet. This is going to keep my value consistent with them. Every time I talk to the customer, I'm going to pull up SplashDash reports. I'm going to pull up CRM reports that they have, and I'm going to continuously sell them the vision, because they need that help. If they could do it themselves, they wouldn't hire you. And so that's a really, really critical component of there. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.